Welcome, everyone. I'm Justin Silverman of the New England First Amendment Coalition. Thank you for joining us for another 30-minute skills. As a reminder, all of our 30-minute skills are available at nefac.org/30-minute skills. They include data cleaning, data visualization, privacy law, Microsoft Excel basics, how to diversify your sources, how to protect yourself as a journalist, among many other topics. You can also find at nefac.org a growing list of upcoming presentations and events focused on the First Amendment and journalism. Nearly all of them are free and open to the public, so please check them out and consider joining us. Today, we'll be discussing ways to dig a little deeper as a broadcast journalist, the mindset needed to best share your reporting, but one that takes into account the unique challenges of broadcasting. We have a lot to cover and not a lot of time, so let's get started. Kevin, all yours.
Great. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. Briefly about myself. I am a reformed newspaper reporter. So my background's a little bit different in broadcast, where I started out. My training was in print. I was a print reporter for a number of years. I had a couple of beats, politics, crime, education. And then in the mid 2000s, I made the leap to broadcast, not something that I had planned to do. First at our local Fox affiliate, and now at the ABC affiliate here in the Boston area at WCVB, both times for the investigative team at these respective stations. And it's given me a little bit of a unique perspective where I've been able to see and work in both of the cultures and see how management, and at least my respective shops, work with and deal with enterprise and investigative reporting. What I'm hopeful folks may be able to get out of the presentation today is how to bring a little bit more of investigative reporting, a little bit enterprise reporting, and a little bit more reporting that holds people accountable, embed that a little bit more into broadcast news, because there's a lot of challenges to doing that. So one of the things that's tough for those of you that work in broadcast know, there's so many other things we have to deal with in addition to the content of the story. We have how much time we have for the story, we have how much time we have to collect it, and there's a lot of problems with getting to the why of what happened. Like, we're all familiar with the 5 W's: who, what, where, when, and why. But with a minute 20 story, a minute 30 story, and maybe a couple hours to put it together, sometimes getting to that why is just impossible. So we had an unfortunate, give an example, last week we had an unfortunate domestic violence murder suicide where one partner murdered another and then killed himself, and it was almost impossible in that time frame to understand what may have happened before then, to understand the story. So what was in their relationship, what was in their history, what supports may or may not there have been, and it was the kind of story where if there was a little more time, a little more resources, a little bit more digging, might have shed some more light on it. Think about any breaking news situation you may have covered: a bridge collapse, a motor vehicle crash, anything breaking news. There's a reason why it happened, and how can we try to find out a little bit more and tell our viewers a little bit more about why that may have happened and how it maybe could have been prevented. So I'm sure if you're working in broadcast, you're familiar with all these issues. It's a very fast-paced environment. You may have a few hours to put something together, and there's a lot of other considerations in addition to fact gathering. You've got your shooting, your editing, you got to maybe find your live shot, and you don't have a lot of time to tell the story. You may have a minute and a half. You may be given a VO or a VOSOT. And when you talk about digging into things like records and documents, they're not very visual either. That's certainly a challenge in our business. It's a visual business. So I feel like there's a lot of pushback to looking into documents and looking into records and asking for records because it's not going to be a visual story. And there's also, I think, a little bit of a knowledge gap where sometimes this stuff is hard. You may need some expertise, or you need to find someone with expertise, someone to interpret some technical documents or a court document. And again, you have all these other challenges of you don't have the time, you don't have the resources, so you're sort of stuck with not being able to dig in as much as maybe you'd like. So there's a couple strategies that I've tried to develop over the years, and as we go through various things in this presentation, I'll say it here and I'll say it again. These are some of the things that I've done to sort of help myself over the years as I work in a fast-paced news environment. And for those of you that are working on in the industry too, maybe you have your own ideas, and I'd love to have a little time at the end to be able to share resources and share ideas about how to make all of our reporting better. So one thing that I think is helpful is maybe difficult, but work to change expectations. So if you're in this seminar, you're probably already interested in enterprise and investigative reporting. I'm guessing if you're in broadcast, there's some frustration you may have felt, as I have, that you're sort of alone in your interest. If there's a way to keep communicating to your producers, to your executive producers, to your news director, that there is more to do than the breaking news, that with a little bit of time and a little bit of resources, you can get more and better than maybe what has been done in the past. That's something I would certainly encourage. It's an incremental battle, and it's a difficult one, but just having these conversations when you can with other people in the newsroom, I think helps raise awareness that there is maybe a more to include or a better way to do things. Another thing, when you're on the run, it's hard to file a public records request. For those of you that maybe haven't done it so far, the NEFAC has a great guide. There's plenty of guides out there, SBJ, and some other resources, but having that template either in an email form or a Word document, so you know it's easy to send out, and you have most of what you need already, and you could just fill in the blanks of what exactly you're looking for, can help speed things up. At least the way that I work, if I get out this FOIA, get out this public records request, when I'm thinking about it the day that it comes up, it's much more likely to get out because tomorrow is a whole new day and a whole new battle. So that's helpful. Another thing seems obvious, but bookmark these online sources of info and data where these resources that are going to help you dig a little bit deeper. And so you don't have to go hunting for them over and over and over again. I'll say this is a lesson I've learned the hard way, as I've been stuck looking for something I know I've seen, and it's a waste of time on when I don't have it. Be able to get the graphics on the air on your own if you can. So this is going to be obviously very specific to your situation and your station, but when there are document-heavy bits of information or data-heavy bits of information, your ability to sort of leverage that onto the air in a short period of time can really be helped by you being able to manage the graphics, whether it's a chart or bullet points or whatever the case may be, if you have to, because that just makes it that much easier for you to make sure that you're getting this information that you took the time to dig onto your own. And last but not least, know your sources, know your courts, know your public records law. It may seem obvious, but it's also a huge time saver. If you know what your rights are and you know who has the information to the best extent that you can, then you may not get pushed into battle, public records battle that you don't have time for. That maybe you can talk a court clerk into providing records that should be provided because you know what your rights are. That came up with me just the other week, where in this example, it was in Massachusetts. Each court has to have an index of criminal defendants. It's something I know from just something I know. And so when a court clerk said the computer was down and nobody could help me find a case, I could say, well, the trial rules are that there's got to be an index that's searchable by the public. And so she did the looking herself. And to know, I love these court documents on breaking news, things like search warrants, records that come along with dangerousness hearings, motions that may have been filed pre-trial. So in Massachusetts, these mostly all become public unless they're sealed, and they're great sources of information, and they're not readily available. They're not, they don't sort of show up in court when someone's arraigned, but if you know to look for them, then there can be huge sources of information that let you dig deeper into a court situation or maybe past court situation. Another problem, lack of time to tell the story. I only got $1.20 to tell the story. How am I supposed to fit in all this other stuff we're talking about getting? There's no easy answer here. We've had some success with maybe doing an anchor breakout after the main story. So the main story is the breaking news, and now I'm going to write up a VO or a VOSAT for the anchors with some details about the records that I found or some data that I went through. It sort of helps in our newsroom, which is our newscast rather, which is very fast paced. That helps keep the pace fast. It helps keep the reporter focused on the story that they have to tell, but then lets us give that extra context that we're hoping to do. I'm sure your online folks would love to have exclusive online content if you can't fit it on the air, and why not? It gets it out there. It does turn out to be a lot of work for you, but it also not only gets the information out, but I think again speaks to maybe helping change the culture a little bit, and the expectation and the realization among the EPs and the desk and all those folks that there's a lot of good stuff out there to be had that no one else is getting. Maybe if you get it online this time, maybe the next time it comes up, maybe that can be your on-air story. Can it be saved for another day? Again, not an easy to say, not always easy to do when you're getting assigned hither and yon, but again, speaking to trying to change the culture a little bit, maybe if you get some good information and can do a follow-up story to the big story of the day, try not to, maybe you don't cram it all in on day one, and maybe you can talk about what you think you can do on day 2 or week 2 when you get that information together. Again, have these conversations with your managers, and hopefully they'll be listening. And all else fails, just beg for another 20, 30 seconds. Say you got good stuff, and hopefully you can deliver. Okay. Records, data, not visual. What are we going to see? How are we going to cover this story? With all this, when you're making these records requests and you're going through paper records, well, especially today, compared to the 70s, 80s, 40s, 50s, 60s, photos and videos are public records too. So don't limit yourself to thinking that you're only going to be getting a stack of paper. Whatever the topic you may be looking in may well have digital photos, may have videos, lots of visuals. So what you're seeing on the screen is a screen grab. It was a video sequence that I got from a public records request to a police department, and that's a former police chief hiding some clothes in a shopping cart as he goes about shoplifting at his local Kohl's department store. So we had done some stories about that the police found him and how the case went to court, and the the clerk magistrate didn't issue the charge. You get the video, that's way better than any police report, which we had too. But we had this whole video from a public records request, and it was great. Graphics, again, I mentioned to see if you can do the graphics yourself. We can do some simple, I could do some simple graphics in a system that we have here at our station, at our company. But don't be afraid of putting up graphics and talking about them. If you have the goods, if you have some exclusive information and interesting information and good context to a story that's in the news, especially, I don't think you need. I think you're okay. A lot of people try to avoid it, but I think you're going to be okay. And that's what I mean by be brave. Like, not everything has to be has to have great visuals. You can have great information if you're concise, if it's relevant, and you're making the case to the viewer why they should know this. Then don't shy away from the good info only because you can only put up some graphics. Okay. I don't understand this stuff. I don't have time to figure it out. I've got this huge stack of records. It's technical. This is not exclusive to broadcast by any means. But think about how you're going to get some help understanding and explaining to your viewer what this stuff means, whether it's a motion filed in court, whether it's a database that has some tricky things that you're not quite understanding. So find your guru, find someone who does understand it and who can explain it to you. The advocacy groups are a great start. I have been known to type into Google association of fill in the blank, whatever the topic is that I'm looking for, accountants, machinists, whatever you want to, they probably have an association, and their job is to promote and speak in the interest of whatever that group is, and chances are they have a press person and can explain some things to you. Asked to speak on background with, you may be dealing with a press person, but asked to speak with their expert on background or off the record. Is, just explain, I just want to make sure I'm explaining this accurately. I don't want to, I want to put it in the right context. And can you put up your data expert? Can you put up your engineer? Just go through this with me. And sometimes I will read part of the script back to someone who I interviewed, that we interviewed. It's something you have to do carefully because you don't want to open up the script to having the source change it to fit their interests, which is why you don't give sources, you don't tell them what the story is, you don't give them the chance to read it. But people may disagree. I find nothing wrong with reading back the language you're using to describe something technical and factual, not necessarily an interpretation of it, but and let them weigh in on it. And I don't feel like I've ever been burned by it. I feel like the sources appreciate what I'm doing. They haven't tried to push me this way or that way. I've done that with some success sometimes. My last little bullet point here is really about if you're looking at semi-large sources of data, not necessarily like breaking news and maybe a simple data set that you may have come across, but if there's something a little more complex with a lot of fields that aren't totally clear, this is really a caution to everybody to really get your questions out as soon as possible. If you've done some analysis, get the analysis out. You got to be fair to the source, and there's a lot of errors that come up in data, not necessarily your analysis of it, and you're going to find some corrections and some maybe some misunderstandings, and you got to give your sources time to get back to you. A quick example here, I was on a daily story with about some stuff that fell from a bridge and hit a car, some concrete on an old bridge. The state of Massachusetts put a lot of data online, including bridge inspection data. So I could find the bridge in the data. I could see the data last inspection, and I sent it off to the PR person, and they said, "Where'd you get this? This isn't right." the bridge has been inspected since then. Well, I was reading the data right, it just hadn't been updated. So by getting that out there soon enough and just asking about it, we were able to correct. It was really their error in not updating their data, but whosever error it was, it stopped us from putting out inaccurate information on the air, even if it wasn't necessarily our fault. And that example always stuck with me as it would have been so easy to do, to just report on what was in front of us, and but just getting that question out sooner rather than later, I think saved us from that error. Okay, let's talk about some of the examples of breaking news, and think about how we could be digging deeper on some breaking news stories that may come your way. I've mentioned this example before, like in the murder-suicide. If you're dealing with a really significant crime, and you want to find out more about the perpetrator, obviously go in and dig into the past cases. That's a regular sort of job of ours, and a lot of other reporters out there, to go dig into the background while maybe a general assignment reporter is covering the actual event. I'm going to court, I'm looking at past cases, finding sources, people that knew the person. And I say use with caution, because there's obviously someone's court cases isn't the entirety of their history. So just something to be sort of sensitive to. Make a list of your cases and follow them. So when the case does break, if your newsroom is anything like ours, it's sometimes we forget about stuff. We move on to the next thing, and just being able to follow your cases, hopefully online, check to see if there's been any updates or major filings, may get you a nice story down the road after the story is broken. Again, talking about crime, I think it's pretty typical that an open investigation, an open case, is not subject to public records law in many locations. Certainly that's the case in Massachusetts. But once it's closed, that is the police files, the DA's files are public records, at least in Massachusetts, and a treasure trove of records. So whatever is part of that case, photos, videos, many documents. Again, you're talking about a crime, maybe you can take a look at, and before it happens, be aware of where you can find the information that will tell you, be able to put this crime in context. There was a high profile murder, well, are murders going up and down in the community? Put it in the context of public safety rather than the individual incident. Airplane or motor vehicle crashes. Again, we're digging into the who and the why. Who owns that airplane? As a driver did something bad on a road, what's the driver's driving record? Our registry of motor vehicles can tell you that with a little bit of information. Trucking, commercial trucking is highly regulated, lots of records. Civilian complaints about an intersection where there was a crash, were civilians complaining before. You get the idea. Pick any breaking news topic, and there's some digging that can be done into it. Politics and government. Well, if you're reporting on a bill that's filed, or a piece of legislation, or a state house event, well, how about looking into some of the money behind it? You get the idea. Okay. See here, document state of mind. That's an old saying in investigative journalism invented by a pair of sort of famous newspaper investigative journalists, Bartlett and Steele. It's a turnoff for broadcasters. Documents. Think of it as record state of mind. Records are created from birth to death. The government is making records about everything and anything. And if you, but think of it as not just words on paper, videos, photos, even objects. There may be, we had access to murder weapons in court, a box in court. And words are okay too. Don't be afraid of the words. I know we're getting short on time. Here's an example of a document, a record from court. We looked at a court filing, a court case from a closed case that went to trial in Middlesex County about for a series we did on human trafficking, and this was an evidence photo that of the proceeds from a spa where prostitution was going on. Real quick, I want to touch on, well, maybe I won't. Be careful of data. That's the data unicorn you see in my screen, which means there's no miracles in data. Be careful about using data quickly if you're not familiar with it, because can be a lot of problems. And a lot of managers, people that aren't familiar with data, are think that it's a magic, the unicorn that you could just go look at it and crank out stories. Okay, I didn't get to some of the ways that we have used data and graphics to tell stories with numbers and records. But I was going to sort of throw that out there to the crowd. Anybody any success stories to share about using data in broadcast or records in broadcast? But I feel like I should stop now and answer any questions, or if anybody has anything they want to share.
Hey, Kevin, no questions just yet. Down to the last couple minutes, so maybe if there are some main takeaways, or 2 or 3 very specific suggestions you haven't hit on yet that you could address in the time that we have remaining, that might be helpful.
I have some examples of how we've used data in broadcast. We have the good fortune of having a graphic designer in-house that has really helped us visualize the data analysis that we've done. So here's a map that he made that goes along with a track that talks about a fairly detailed data analysis we did, and boiled down to what percentage of people charged with prostitution offenses, so either women who were trafficked or the Johns who paid for it. So who was being prosecuted? And in some of these communities, you can see it was 90% women. This was also made by our designer, but it doesn't have to be animated or fancy, or you don't need a designer necessarily. Super simple, and it tells the story that we were trying to tell, where we, with the help in this case of the Stanford Open Policing Project, had analyzed state police traffic stops. Simple bar graph. Look at the disparity and how the race of drivers that state police were searching. I think we're just about out of time. So unless there's anything else Justin or anybody else wants to go over, I'll hold off there.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. Just one quick question before we wrap up today. I know most of what we discussed and the resources that we shared are relevant to work in the US. Are there any international organizations you can think of, or any other resources that might be available to those that are working outside of the States?
Well, I can't speak to the the availability of records in other countries. The international journalists that are joining this call, thank you, would know that better. But I think it's just universal, just to keep pushing. I think there's a little bit of at least in the broadcast shops I've been at, there's a little bit of a cultural resistance to this kind of digging and investigative and things like that. And I think the message I'm just trying to get out is just keep trying. I think, at least in my experience, the managers that may not be embracing it, when they see what you can do, they love it. So they say no, just do it anyway, and maybe they'll like it, whatever country you're in.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate all these suggestions, all this help. Very informative. Also want to thank everybody who joined us today. If you found today's class helpful in any way, I want to ask you to please consider becoming a sustaining member of NEFAC. You can do so at nefac.org/join. That annual support is what helps make classes like this happen. So thank you again for attending today. And Kevin, thank you for being here. Appreciate your time. We'll see you all next month for our next 30-minute skills. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.